Okay, Doc. So I got another questions. Hello, thanks for the great info you guys are putting out there. I recently suffered a ruptured patella tendon, and I recently came across a claim exogenous testosterone administration claims. Yeah, uh, exogenous testosterone administration can have a negative impact on collagen synthesis. I've had a hard time finding any hard data supporting connective tissue degradation connection in connective tissue. Could Dr. Rand touch on this topic and also on other anabolic which might aid in connective tissue health, in which might be harmful to connective tissue? I had been administrating a testosterone label as 250 milligrams, which is probably on the ground. Who knows what it was actually, what it actually was? But I used it twice a week for a total of 500 a week. I used it roughly for 9 weeks with no other anabolics, as this was my first cycle ever. I should also note I am 25 years old male who have been lifting for roughly 8 years. My injury happened while being tackled playing a pickup game of football. I've had many issues with knees pain, but never anything serious before. Do you believe there's a connection between testosterone and my injury, or it's just coincidental? Thank you again to the both of you.
That's a hard one without seeing the injury and knowing a little bit more. And I could ask some more questions if it's infrapatellar or suprapatellar. But boy, I could probably make a pretty good guess as to what happened. If 25 years old, I don't know why someone 25, certainly that's not a replacement therapy dose, or you wouldn't think a typical 25-year-old would need replacement therapy. But the first thing that comes to mind is, hey, you're developing still at 25. I mean, I think the cutoff is still officially 26 before you're officially an adult, or you stop growing.
You said 27, or they shouldn't be using anabolics until 27.
Right, because 26 you're still growing. I think that's still the line they draw in the sand. But my point is, what we've talked about for years in the weightlifting athletic world is, you can develop your muscles much more quickly than you can the ligaments and tendons. So I mean, isn't that the first thing that comes to mind is, hey, you went on a 9-week cycle. It's certainly kicked in by the 6th week. Even though you've been lifting for 8 years, all of a sudden, and there's no mention of what the strength or weight gains were, but presumably you got stronger, and it probably overtaxed the patellar ligament or tendon, excuse me. Again, where is kind of important. Was it the infrapatellar or the suprapatellar tendon that gave way? Was it a traumatic injury? Was it just a pull and it pulled off of the infrapatellar pulled off the tibia? But again, my guess is, it probably had something to do with it, just because you got too strong, too fast. Yeah. The ligaments and tendons take longer. We've known that for a long time to strengthen, unlike muscle tissue, which can grow pretty quickly. The other part of the question is, what can you do? A lot of bodybuilders have for a long time done testosterone or an anabolic steroid with growth hormone. Growth hormone, while it can help grow muscle tissue, really focuses more on the other soft tissues and organs, skin being an organ, but also, the ligaments and tendons. So both in terms of repair, anything he can do to help build up his own levels of growth hormone, which would involve high levels of protein, as you know, as part of it. It's, hormone. Growth hormone is a peptide hormone. In this case, we're talking about something for protein.
Protein, glutamine.
But then, would testosterone have necessarily broken down the tissue? No, I've never heard that before. If anything, testosterone will help build certainly muscle tissue. Again, it's an anabolic, so I wouldn't think it would add to destruction of the tendon. Again, I think it's more from what we talked about. Yeah. And there was mention of prior knee problems. Again, these are all things that confound my simple curbside analysis of what might happen here. But I suspect that's probably what happened. Is I'd love, I don't know if we ever get follow-up letters, but, sort of answers to my questions to fill in the blanks. But I'd love to hear some of the
Doc, you get so many questions, I can't even think about doing follow-ups.
Well, it'd be great to know, but for my sake, as a nerd who loves to answer these questions, it'd be great to see some of these things, fleshed out a little bit more to find out really what it was.
I may have to do two shows and ask the doc, and the doc wants to know.
Doc Hollow. Yeah, right, there you
go. Well, I'll think about that, you guys. It's not done yet. All right. Thank you, Doc. All right, Doc. Here's another one for you. So, hello, Dave. I'm 32 years old, and I'm weightlifting since for about 11 years old. I think this person is actually French. So just natural for 11 years. Serious with good nutrition. Never took any steroids. I noticed that I hit a plateau, and I'm thinking about taking something. I would have a doctor for that. I don't want to put that big that big. I don't want to put that much muscle on. Maybe 8 kilo. He's obviously from Europe, so about 20 pounds more muscle mass, and be ripped all year. I'm about 8% body fat right now. So short question: what is for you? Or what is it? What's your advice for putting on the safest? Oh boy. What is it for you exactly the safest way to use any steroids? What sort would you recommend? Doses or combination cycle? It would be fine. I would be fine with low doses, just to get a bit more muscle mass to improve further. What do you think about MK677, which I think we covered before? We talked about that before. It's a SARM, right? I would be so happy to get an answer. I would be really happy about it. All the best.
Well, you're not going to like this answer. I mean, the first part, under doctor's supervision is kind of the no-brainer answer. I mean, at 32, without knowing the testosterone, I mean, clinically, again, we're and I've said we treat people, not numbers, but clinically, apparently there's some signs and symptoms of low T. Then let's get numbers to back them up, just to make sure that it's not 1,200 total T and a free T of 24.
Right.
And we go, okay, well, we missed something here. It was your thyroid that was off or something else. So again, while I say often, probably too often, you don't treat numbers, treat people, we still use the numbers to back up and support what's going on and rule out or rule in certain things. So assuming that you're in need of testosterone replacement therapy, then again, under the doctor's supervision is the obvious best way of doing it, because you can monitor your labs. You have somebody presumably who's qualified to give you advice as to what you need, and that could involve, I mean, there's so many things that aren't even being considered here. I know
Right.
he's focused on physique, but what about fertility? What about testicular atrophy? At 32, have you had children? Do you want to have children?
Right.
Even if you told me you didn't, I'd say, well, let's make sure. I mean, you get my point.
Yeah.
So again, I know you're not going to like the answer under doctor's supervision, because that leaves it wide open, but it is still the appropriate answer. From there, I mean, it's up to the doctor. If you say he's French, I don't know what the laws are there, but there are indications for anabolics. Obviously, this guy sounds like he's already in fantastic shape. Please send back what you're doing to stay at very muscular 8% body fat. I'd like whatever help I can get. We all want to get as much help and pass on what someone else is doing, even if it's just anecdotal. As far as the what he was referring to, ibutamoren is how I go by. What is it, MK677?
MK677, yeah.
Ibutamoren is great. Ibutamoren I can tell you more about. Ibutamoren is a peptidomimetic, which is a fancy way of saying it acts like a peptide, but it's not. So you can ingest it. It's an oral, and it acts to get the body to produce more growth hormone. It's a growth hormone releasing peptide mimetic, if you will.
Yeah.
So it acts a lot like some of the GHRPs 2 and 6, which are on the market.
Yeah.
And it works through the stomach, which is an interesting, you say, well, how does it, growth hormone through the stomach mechanism? Yeah. Through something I still don't know how to pronounce. Ghrelin is how I call it. It's a weird, a GHRELIN. But that's what makes you hungry. And so you want to take ibutamoren on an empty stomach, but right before you go to bed, so you can presumably, hopefully, sleep through any hunger that you might feel. A better combination would be a growth hormone releasing hormone analog like samorelin that works through one mechanism, obviously growth hormone releasing hormone, and then this peptidomimetic, again, working through a different mechanism. I've seen pretty incredible results using the combination of, for example, again, samorelin and either the GHRPs or ibutamoren. The thing is, we don't have an oral for the real peptides. So, I recommend an injectable if you're going to use a combination, because you always already have to inject yourself anyway.
Yeah.
But Ibutamoren Orange is pretty convenient because you can travel with it. It's an
Yeah.
oral. People who don't like needles.
Yeah.
So hopefully I'm giving you something out of that question. Again, the other one's kind of hard to answer because it's kind of a wide open question. If you need replacement therapy, then yeah, I mean, there's a whole gamut you got to run through to figure out what's going to be best for you.
Yeah. Thanks, Doc.